Day 45, and the Shifa hospital drama could not get worse. So initially, the IDF claimed from day one of this war that Shifa hospital was indeed the command center for the terrorist operations inside Gaza. They've said it day and day, and then they also got the support of the United States, who greenlit the operation of the IDF to go in and take over Shifa hospital. Now, a few days ago, they went in, they showed what they found initially was, a few AK-47s, a few grenades, a go bag, and a laptop. Now, in a legal perspective, that's enough to showcase military activity inside the hospital, but in the court of public opinion, that was not enough. People on the street were saying, we expect more. You showed us this infographics, all these beautiful renderings of this tunnel network and the command and control center. We want to see this, not a few AK-47s. And that's a valid argument from a public relations perspective. But legally speaking, once the IDF found those guns and those grenades and all of these weapons, they were in the clear from an international law perspective. But now they're fighting a whole new front in the PR battle. Now, today they've released more footage, which is very damning and very incriminating, much more than the initial AK-47s. Today what we've seen is very interesting. We've seen a tunnel, a significant tunnel with a blast door, and what clearly is a military tunnel, and they didn't show us what's behind this door. Either they didn't breach it yet, or they did and they didn't want to show us, whatever the case may be, I don't know. But this was clearly a massive military tunnel underneath Shifa hospital. We've also seen footage of Israeli hostages being led inside Shifa hospital on October 7th. And that raised a lot of questions by people who support the Palestinians, and they're saying, oh, look, Tom, these people are being wounded and they're being led to a hospital. Maybe they were there to get treated. And that's a valid argument. It's just the problem is in between Shifa hospital and the place of the abductions in Israel, there's literally 12 other hospitals in Gaza. The people who took the hostages made the trip across Gaza Strip, in which they've skipped 12 other hospitals to get all the way to Shifa hospital. Why? I mean, it's possible. Everybody ran out of room in every other hospital. It's possible, but is it probable? I like probabilities, and it seems to me that the fact that they chose specifically the furthest hospital, Shifa, outside of all the other ones, showcases that at the very least, it was used for a dual purpose by the terrorist organization Hamas. Now look, the other thing you can see in the footage is the guy who's leading the so-called injured into the hospital is carrying a meat cleaver. Now I don't know what about the health services in Gaza and how far along are they, but I'm not, maybe I'm wrong, but a meat cleaver in the hospital, look, it doesn't smell well to me. I understand why people want to showcase why Hamas isn't what it seems to be and why the Palestinian Authority isn't what it's supposed to be and the Palestinians are such great and honest people and, the poor civilians. But the truth is, this hospital was used by a military organization to carry out military operations, terrorist activities. That's been proven. Now the fight is how much it was used, and it's more of a PR fight. I don't think it's a legal fight anymore. And as days go by, I'm confident the IDF is going to release more footage of more tunnels, more intel that will come up. But at this point, I think the legal battle is done. And now that we've seen the tunnel and we've seen the hostages, we've seen enough to establish that the claims were not absolutely ridiculous. How close we're going to get to the rendering of the command center and the rooms and the tunnels, I don't know yet. Remains to be seen. Right now, there's a new development which is even more important than Shifa Hospital, because right now, we're getting news that the IDF is letting people know in Sajaiya, which is a whole different neighborhood they've pretty much left alone so far in North Gaza, to evacuate. Now, why is that? Because Sajaiya is a fortress. This is the main neighborhood where Hamas is dug in the deepest. And that's the one that gave the Israelis the most amount of problems last time they were in Gaza in 2014. That one they kept for last. They've decided to take all the north and then come from all sides at Sajaiya. Now they're telling people to evacuate, which means that they're about to get there. Right now, they're fighting in Beit Lahiya, Jabalia, Beit Hanun, Rimal, and Zaytun, which are all the neighborhoods that surrounding Sajaiya. The next part will be take Gaza City, the center, and then Sajaiya will have to be next. And it's going to be a huge test for the IDF because this is probably the most fortified, the most defended place out of the entire North Gaza sector. Now, so far, the IDF has basically eliminated 2 out of the 4 Hamas battalions that operated in the north of Gaza, which basically means that at this point, Hamas is running about 50% capacity in the north. The entire command of Gaza, of Hamas, basically fled through tunnels that actually originate from Shifa Hospital all the way to the Nusrat camp, and then from there to Han Yunis in the south, which is the next big destination for IDF, because there there is now the command center of Hamas, and that place will be used either to survive until a PR pressure from the international community stops the Israelis, that way saving Hamas, or it's going to be the last stand of Hamas in Han Yunis. Whatever the case may be, they're fortifying in Han Yunis, waiting for the IDF there after failing in the north. But the north would not be finished until they can check the box on that Sajaya neighborhood. Now, the next phase will be cutting the north into half. They're going to go and cut the north in half by going through this middle part, and that way they get to control what comes in and out, so they prevent reinforcements and supplies to the Sajia combatants of Hamas, the terrorists that are sitting there waiting for the IDF being fortified. In the north of Israel, there's a lot of activity with Hezbollah, a major rocket attack today on an Israeli military base, massive destruction. The IDF at this point does not want a second front almost at any cost. They would like to avoid it as much as possible and hold off with getting back at Hezbollah after they finish off Hamas. So they're willing to absorb all of this and kind of fire back very sporadically. How long is this going to last? I don't know. Right now in Gaza, things are moving along quite quicker than people thought. The IDF did lose 65 soldiers so far, but this is still a number that is not even close to what the presumption was by Hamas and other military groups of how hard it's going to be for the IDF. So the IDF is taking casualties, but it's absolutely moving at a frantic pace. The North Command Center is gone. The Hamas rule in the north has collapsed. Now it's just a question of time, and then it moves to Han Yunis and the south. Right now, there's a talk of a peace deal, of a ceasefire deal, whatever you call it. 50 hostages for 5 days of a ceasefire. That's the proposition. And then there is kind of this chatter that Hamas is going to release 10 hostages every day until they run out of hostages to buy themselves more time. They either want to move the remaining command center leaders from the north to the south with the ceasefire, or they're hoping that the ceasefire will become permanent due to international pressure. But the Israelis have been supplying gasoline to Gaza, which has not happened since the beginning of the war. They provided 120,000 liters of fuel yesterday, and every day from this point forward is going to be 70,000 liters of fuel. It will be primarily used to fuel the sewage system and the desalination plants to provide water for the people of Gaza, to prevent any sort of a medical crisis, humanitarian crisis. And that's on top of the food trucks that come in every single day. So the south of Gaza, where the civilians are, is being supplied with food, water, electricity, and gasoline right now by the Israelis. Now, the one thing to mention is that things are changing on the weather front. As winter comes in to this part of the world, it's going to be more rainy, more muddy, and a new river is going to fill up with water, which is usually dry. It's called the Wadi Gaza. And once it's filled up with water, due to all the rains, it's going to create a barrier from the north to the south, which is going to make the Israeli forces movement a lot more complex. So they have really this incentive to finish as much of it as they can, as much of the north they can, before the rains, before the mud, before it's going to be tough to move, because the people who are dug in don't have as much of a challenge as the forces that have to move forward and be on the offensive. So the idea here is to get as much done before the weather actually pops off and make things a lot more complex. Now, there's a lot of chatter about the day after. What happens with Hamas and what happens with Gaza? Obviously, Hamas will be gone, but what happens with the Gaza Strip? What kind of status? Who's going to run it? How it's going to work out? So far, every single entity that was asked to get involved in this, whether it be Egypt or Jordan or even the Palestinian Authority, they've all pretty much said no. Now, if you want to learn why all of them are saying no, why even the Palestinian Authority does not want to do this, there's a really fascinating talk we have to have about this. I made a whole video about it. It is absolutely mind-blowing. You've never heard this anywhere before. I'm going to put the video right here. I'll see you there in just a second. But before you do, make sure you go right here. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And of course, this channel isn't monetized, so consider joining as a channel member to support the channel. But as always, thank you. And let's go right here. Let's talk about why nobody wants Gaza.